on my screen. But anyways, hi everyone. Welcome to IOTTT Saturday Night Chat. And this initiative is a recent one from IOTTT. We have been doing this since towards end of 2021. So we thought all professional issues, kind of starts with the discussion around a table. So we thought the first thing to tackle any issues is to discuss about it and bring in different perspectives, and then eventually to develop strategies on how to best address the issue for everyone's benefit. So with that notion, we thought, okay, everything starts with a discussion. So that's the basic premise behind this idea of Saturday Night Chat. So every chat, we have a topic and a moderator who kind of guides us through the discussion. So again, these conversations get rich only when all of us share our perspectives. So whatever comes to your mind reflecting on the Indian context, please share your views and thoughts. And whatever the thoughts shared here are unique to the person who is sharing, doesn't represent IOTT's views or thoughts. Having said that, today's moderator is Dr. Suresh Lala. So I'm inviting Dr. Lala to take over the session and guide us through the discussion about how best are we using technology in OT education in India. Dr. Lala, over to you.
Thanks, Karthik. Good evening, good morning, and greetings to everyone wherever you are on planet Earth. I have had the pleasure to work with Karthik in some capacity, and I am very grateful for this opportunity to network and collaborate with folks across different continents. And in the spirit of our discussions and chat, I'd like to serve as the moderator for today's session with hopes that folks from diverse clinical and teaching and research backgrounds will collaborate and give us ideas on how we can infuse creativity and innovation using technology or some non-technology related means in our educational processes. So today's session is going to discuss opportunities for creativity, which includes infusion of the arts, which could also include technology and some other areas where OT education can have more opportunities to perhaps diversify outside of the traditional medical model. Most of us in OT have practiced the typical biomedical model for the past several years. In fact, for at least 5 or so decades now, we've been overutilizing the medical model. So I wanted to start off this conversation with not just me talking about the overutilization of our OT specifically related to the biomedical model, and then look at options that you've created within educational training programs or perhaps in research um, projects to explore opportunities for OT to then look beyond the medical model, which has its own issues in and of itself for OT practice. So any thoughts, Pooja, Suresh, or Nidhi on uh, any interventions, trainings, or even research opportunities that you've considered or known of that are outside the typical traditional clinic model of occupational therapy?
Um, Basically, I have not. I have. I mean, basically, I've taught and I've been taught from medical college. So I did my UG PG both from KEM, and I was an assistant professor at Nair Hospital. So in both the scenarios, I was in an overly medical model, not just biomedical, properly medical model even. So we have been utilizing the age-old traditional way of teaching and hands-on clinical practice. That's it. So um, basically, that is why I was very, very interested in attending today's chat, because I wanted to broaden my own thoughts and spectrum, that how and I was curious and how what else could we add. So basically, I'm clueless in this topic actually. So
Oh,
I will pitch in wherever I could get new ideas, but right now I don't have any ideas to add on.
no worries, Pooja. And I appreciate your openness to learning and knowing about all of these opportunities. And sometimes occupational therapy practitioners are sort of wired to not give themselves as much credit. For instance, if you've done any home health, if you've ever been to a patient's home, you've
Yes.
provided services outside of the traditional medical model. It's no
Yes.
longer a clinic. Uh, if you've gone, I don't know if you've ever been to Sign, but when the Sign Hospital had the barracks, the department was in the barracks, there used to be a paraplegic foundation, which was sort of
Yes.
a
I have been
residential,
there.
and
I've been.
it is close to the hospital, but it's a non-clinical model of practice where you don't have all of the typical facilities and equipment that you would anticipate in a hospital ward or even in an outpatient department.
So I guess even practicing in a typical school as a school-based occupational therapy would be an outside because I've done that also. So
It can be considered as an emerging area of practice in some cases where school-based OT or even non-medically based OT, which is so sort of situated in the social model of practice, where you're actually meeting the clients where they're functioning, more so asking them to come to a clinic or seeing them at a hospital, which we've traditionally done for our training and then also for practice in so many ways. So there's been this wave of emerging practice areas which focus more on the social model and sometimes even on the psychosocial model of practice to meeting the clients where they are rather than us asking the clients to come see me at the clinic or I'll be at the hospital between these hours. And the practice there has become for OTs almost contrived where it feels artificial because it's not the context in which the patient operates or completes their occupations. Activities can feel very artificial because they are make believe activities with regards to just creating opportunities which may be purposeful, which may help the individual be more occupationally independent, but they're not necessarily always translated to gains in occupational performance.
yes.
So we've seen a lot of those non-traditional and role emerging practice areas in the US, particularly when it comes to breaking away from the biomedical model and then trying to infuse OT in social settings, including patients' own individual practice settings where they are functioning for the most part. We've seen off late that there's aging in place where our senior citizens are choosing to spend as much time as they can in their own environments because if they go to a senior center or if they go to a place for a geriatric residential living, they feel disconnected with their surroundings. So aging in place, where we provide assistive technology, home modifications, and equipment for individuals to stay in their home settings as long as they can, with of course help coming in through service providers who are mostly home-based health practitioners. They're offering these opportunities for more of these emerging practice areas, which are considered to be non-traditional because they are not contemporary. Contemporary OT practice in the last 50 or 60 years has been mostly hospital-based or clinic-based. So we're sort of wanting to emerge our presence more so in the social model and including the psychosocial context, particularly keeping in mind our roots in mental health. But it has been extremely challenging because of reimbursement and payment models. We sometimes get reimbursed higher in medical settings versus in the non-medical settings, as you mentioned, the school-based or even in sometimes home-based care may have a different rate of reimbursement depending on which country or state you're practicing in. Anybody else has any thoughts about the emerging practice areas or the practice areas related to the psychosocial model away from the medical model?
So, Suresh, again, I'm kind of thinking, I'm again, as Pooja mentioned, I'm a bit curious to really know what type of non-traditional settings that the students have been sent to for the clinical postings in India. So, um, of course, in the US, we have just kind of like using a variety of models, non-medical models, and a lot of like emerging scenarios here. We have a student-run clinic at UTMB, which is based in the community, and it is like totally focused on serving the underinsured and uninsured population. Even though there is a broad connection to the medical model there, but it's mostly like, in the community, by the community, with the help of students serving them. So, we are really like testing out a lot of traditional, non-traditional models here. And then one of the A code standard itself is, we need to encourage the clinical rotations in traditional, non-traditional, and role emerging settings. So I don't know how much this is applicable in India. I mean, like, what is the scenario in India? I think Nidhi and Pooja could answer this, like where the current students have been sent to. Like, when I was a student back then, we were sent to either inpatient rehab settings or hospitals mostly. Is still the case, or are we like, sending students to, obviously there are a lot of outpatient clinics nowadays. When I had my OT clinic, I didn't have any field of students in my clinic, but I invited the students to the hospitals because they value to be in there. So when I worked as an OT in the hospital, I extended opportunity for field of rotations, and some of the students from Santosh College of OT attended it. So again, my question bottom line is, those who are in India, please, if you could talk about where the students are currently being posted for the clinical rotations.
So basically, in KEM and Nair, because those are the two places I've been. Um, we have OPD, we have IPD, we have a vocational area in KEM, which is now basically gradually converting into an OPD itself, because earlier there was lots of vocational training happening in that sector, but gradually that printing press got shut down. Then, I mean, things started shutting down. The whole wood fret work and basket weaving and etc., which was there earlier when I joined, was gradually not there by the time I left KEM. So current generation wouldn't have seen that, definitely. So that was there. Then we had ICU and ICU emergency OPDs, like, I mean, IPDs as well, areas like burns unit. um, we had the plastic surgery setting, hand clinics where we attended, high risk and ICU clinics, kangaroo care. And so these were all kind of in the hospital. So we never went off the campus, but they were all created, I mean, developed in the hospital area itself. And in Nair, they sent to another hospital for burns training, but otherwise the areas of practice are same. So, but I was basically interested in, forensic psychiatry side. So I was always wishing that if they could send us to juvenile homes, and because we have one near Bombay Central. So I wanted to go there, but I requested as well, but that didn't happen. Plus, we do have visits, 1 day visits, few day visits to other centers like Haji Ali, then National Academy of Blind, then Leprosy Center, Community, then many other places actually, CP, Bandra Spastic Society. Uh, we went to multiple places actually. So to list them, it's difficult right now, but
No, but basically, if you categorize the places you all went to, like
huh.
medical-based settings versus community-based settings,
So
it's
community-based
majority
settings,
medical-based, right?
medical, yeah,
Just a
and
few,
community basis were for few days, for
few
1 day
days.
trip, or
I
Haji Ali
got
was for a week trip,
I
basically.
got it. Okay.
So something like that, yeah.
In the fourth year of the OT program, I just wanted to add to your comment. There's a class at the Maharashtra University of Health Sciences, a course which is focused on CBR, community-based rehabilitation.
I remember
And
that.
there used to be
Yes.
a building inside the midst of Dharavi, which is the largest slum in Mumbai, where I remember going for a posting there for an entire month before I could even graduate.
Oh,
And
wow.
yeah, so the 6 months internship after the 4 years was based in the community-based rehabilitation project, and it was mostly like a long-term care setting inside the midst of Dharavi slums, where there was this one yellow-colored building, which was, I think, maybe 3 stories at most, and all of the patients that were mostly in a vegetative state used to be transferred from Sion Hospital to this building in Dharavi, and mostly our work with them used to be so preparatory in terms of positioning, range of motion, maybe splinting if any of those patients. But most of the patients were vegetative state patients, which really had such low level functioning physically and mentally that it used to be just an insight into, how medical model has sort of failed these patients in so many ways because they were institutionalized in a long-term setting in the midst of nowhere. But at the same point in time, it also provided the opportunity for the family to have the time to maybe see what the potential for the person was like in case there was any recovery in their cases. But anybody else would like to chime in about the non-medical model of practice that you've experienced? Emmanuel has raised her hand.
I was just thinking of my own personal situation where my mother-in-law is in a nursing home right now, and I see a lot of potential there for psychosocial OT practice. Typically, OTs who come there, there's PT coming in and giving exercises, and there is no valued role for OT. And if at all OT comes, they tend to do more of PT type of work.
Mm.
But so I ended up hiring an art teacher for my mother-in-law who pretty much does OT with her. Um, so when I had an OT, I wanted to collaborate with her and see if we can kind of do something more that would go with her interests and make her feel more engaged and meaningful in her day-to-day activities. But that doesn't seem to be the training that OTs come with. So, which is which seems to be the case here also in nursing homes. OTs also operate from a very medical model. Um, so I'm Savita, by the way. I'm using my husband's account.
No problem, Savita. I'm so sorry. I didn't realize that till now. And you're in the U.
I'm in Dallas, in
Oh,
the
okay.
Dallas area.
Okay.
I practice in school-based practice, but I've also worked quite a bit in other settings as well.
I'm glad that your loved one is getting good care in good hands, hopefully at the facility. And practice, as you mentioned, for us has become so medical, irrespective of even because of conditioning. If you even put in someone like myself or maybe someone else who's been trained in the intensive care unit and the trauma-based care model, I was trained in a level 1 trauma center. But if you put someone like me in a facility, even a skilled nursing facility or long-term care, where we want to look more into creativity in terms of more arts-based OT rather than the science aspect of OT, it just is a little uncomfortable. I sometimes feel a lot more uncomfortable because I've not been trained in the arts of the OT. I mean, we had a few classes in Psych OT where we saw the lathe machine and we would make greeting cards with patients with mental health disorders, but it was not necessarily heavily arts based. I mean, we don't remember any of the weaving ever being done. I know of the word basket weaving, but I had never had the opportunity to even see needle crafts or paper more, I mean, paper crafts at best, but woodworking was also so contrived where we would just have, that sander, and we would ask the patient keep sanding without it being anything meaningful. It was either a unilateral or a bilateral sander, and it was just an exercise rather than a meaningful um, activity with an end product. Um, but it's been one of those things that has been on our minds with infusing training in educational institutions to then find that happy medium, if that is even possible, between the art and science of occupational therapy. So our practitioners are more comfortable when they graduate, perhaps not at the bachelor's level, but at the graduate level, to then use both aspects of OT more sort of fluidly rather than feeling like a fish out of water in a arts-based practice or a social practice setting when their training has been so heavily based in the medical model.
I wonder if they go through any service-based learning because they have to unlearn a lot of things that they've learned in the OT program because we do have a very, very medical approach to our profession, right? Obviously, that kind of is dictated by the payment system, at least outside. I mean, I don't know about India, but in other places, I think what gets paid is what gets done. So if we could just give them these service projects in the community that they can go in and make a difference, then they look at more of what the effect is than the means. So it doesn't take a lot of it takes more of common sense to see, okay, this is what this person needs and this is what we need to do, than thinking, okay, I'm an OT and this is what I do.
I agree. Suresh?
Yeah, thanks. It's kind of very insightful thoughts from all of you. I'm just focusing only on India, and I must say that in 1998, when I started to learn occupational therapy in India, we had fresh teachers, I must say, not very old teachers. And this is 20 years back again. So we had people from Ceylon, we had people from KEM, we had people from Delhi, we had people from Tamil Nadu. All of them were in almost all the colleges. Yeah, so even if it is Mumbai, if it's Ceylon or KEM, we did have some teachers from Tamil Nadu, some teachers from North India, and some from other parts of India as well. And there was creativity at that time in terms of teaching, because I think we were very roughly said that what you do here and what you learn here is all about something that you actually didn't want to learn, and that is why you came to the college to learn. So, so very frankly speaking, when somebody do not get an MBBS seat or a dental college seat, we try and end up in something called physiotherapy, and even if that seat is not there, we'll be allotted in OT. And as friends, when we talk, why did you join? Is there any reason why you joined? They'll say, no, I didn't get any other seat, so I just joined OT. And at this point of time, these teachers were fantastic in terms of having one position called community-based rehabilitation posting. And within the college, there'll be one position. So whether it's any college, we will have a CBR team, and occupational therapists will be sitting at that CPR team. There'll be a tutor there to help us learn what we do in the community. That was fantastic because we go to this small place that you said, Sirish. So in Dharavi, there'll be a small building. We go there, but from there, our duty the next 2 hours will be to go to the community and then see who's disabled there and then do whatever we can. That concept is kind of vanished, but there was a drawback in that concept since then, because we did not have multidisciplinary or interdisciplinary community-based rehabilitation at that time. And for the past 20 years, we have been having our own CBR setup, OT based, and we don't think about what else can this person who's living in the community can gain from in terms of occupational performance, not just from an OT perspective, but from other rehabilitation team members' contribution. And that brings us to the current status, which again, honestly speaking, the creativity has completely vanished in an Indian context, especially for educating youngsters who want to learn what is occupational therapy and how pragmatic occupational therapy practice can be happening in a context like India. I say this especially because we recently had this All India OT Association general body meeting, and I was kind of asking a question related to why don't we update the curriculum related to research. And there was a senior most person in occupational therapy. I don't want to name the person, but the comment from that person was, it is not necessary for undergraduates to learn research in OT because they will not have the mindset to do it. So a senior most experienced teacher, leader in OT in a country like India, has a kind of preconceived notion that undergraduates will not have the mindset to learn research in OT. And that kind of gives us the flavor of how our education system is kind of steering the young occupational therapy students towards being independent practitioners, and it also kind of impacts on the quality of education that we get pan India.
And thank you, Suresh, for those comments and just giving such a thoughtful response to how some of our conditioning as practitioners is impacted by seniors, by leaders in the profession who sort of dictate what should be a part of the curricula and what shouldn't be. And this also includes some of the negative stereotypes that have been associated with creativity, the arts, as well as any innovative technique that when it is first launched or introduced, certain segments of the society, including certain generations, and not just generations, individuals as such may have a negative response in the very beginning. I still remember when the smartphones came out. That was a piece of technology. It was innovative. It was going to change the way we operate with our society and the way we communicate. But there was also this strong movement that cell phones, you would have these radiation and they would have these negative airwaves and it could cause a whole range of disorders. And so every innovation, whether it is related to technology or related to the arts, has always been met with some resistance. And this also happens with any research-based projects, or the understanding that at what level is research going to yield most favorable outcomes, whether it's at the bachelor's level or at the master's level, versus just students being recipients of these different perspectives from different stakeholders. And we've seen a lot of negativity associated with creative models of practice. And till date, that is sort of infused in our student populations because when they go to the medical model and they train in the medical model, they feel like they have a better quality experience in the NICU or the ICCU because it involves a higher skill set. But when you bring that same student who saw the higher level skill required in the intensive care into a CBR unit, where there are patients that are long term, maybe vegetative, don't have as much response in terms of their functioning, the student feels that the training is a diluted experience. So they feel like they really don't need any significant skills. They could have done the internship or the training with service learning, as Savita was saying, or with a non-traditional experience in a community-based practice with just a high school diploma after their 12th. They didn't need to, go through formal training or 3.5 or 4.5 years of OT school to be successful in a community-based rotation. So those sort of perspectives and perceptions exist amongst the student populations themselves. I totally understand where you're coming from a senior most person or a leader of the profession, sort of having these preconceived notions and these stereotypes. But even our students have reported that reality is formed by diverse stakeholders. So as Karthik was mentioning earlier, that you have to think about the students, you have to think about the educator perspectives, you have to think about employer perspectives because our students are going to need to find employment somewhere, right, after they graduate. What do the employers feel about student training in the biomedical model being so heavy as compared to some of their training, which is sort of superficial and laissez-faire in the role emerging or arts infused social OT settings. So there's been a lot of dialogue amongst different stakeholders, and some of the research activity that is going on is based off of stakeholder perspectives to find some sort of common ground between all of those different stakeholders, from students, educators, leaders, and how that can help us shape the future of the OT training and the curriculum forward. Um, Pooja, you have a comment, or Suresh, you have a comment. One of you raised your hands first.
I think mine is a legacy hand, so I'll just
Yeah, just
take it
gonna
off.
put it.
No
Pooja, would you
worries.
like to go?
Yeah, so basically, regarding few things like, as Sir said that in 1998, there was a bit of creativity and, the arts was there. So I remember during my assistant professor thing, I once spoke to senior teachers, about the creativity and basket weaving and everything which was earlier there and why it's not there. So it so happened in earlier it was BSc OT under Mumbai University, Bombay University. So that I think got changed in 2002, 2003 to MUHS. So what happened? There was a drastic syllabus change during that time. They earlier had the whole first year and second year, wherein they had wood carving practically. I mean, OT students had practically learned wood carving, basket weaving, fret work, other things. So it was there in the syllabus. They had arts in the syllabus. And when it shifted to MUHS, the whole subject was out. I mean, there was nothing. So except as examples that we learned that this could be done, but we have not practically learned how to do it. We have not practically seen how it is done. So basically, that maybe that shift that we had, at that time, could be one of the reasons why the arts has been lost, and we have more moved towards the medical model instead of going towards the socio model. See, basically, if I'm not wrong, OT all over the world started in a medical model in hospital. Yeah, so it started with the medical conditions and more so in a hospital based practice, but certain countries moved towards the social disability model, while what I have observed, and even my current research that is which I had taken up earlier. So in that, when I read through the responses of occupational therapists, senior occupational therapists from India, from others countries as well, what I learned was that India is actually moving more and more towards the medical model because of the diagnostic based practice, because of more of clinic and hospital based practice, while the other countries are actually moving more and more towards home based practice, the community centers, building up halfway homes, nursings, school based OT, etc. So there are, I mean, the research basically showed that there are 6 factors that could have pushed this and created this kind of diversification in practice, even though both, I mean, the OT originally started everywhere in a similar situation. So one is the insurance-based practice that is not there in India, while it is there in the many of the developed countries. Okay, so insurance, if I mean, if I'm not wrong, it covers, geriatric areas and pediatric areas, and prevention of disability as well to a certain extent. While over here it is out of pocket, payment or service. So what happens is unless and until you don't have illness or unless and until you don't have something, it's very difficult for people to spend their own money to get some service done. So that was one factor that was found. Second factor which was found was also the country model, in the sense that in India, the healthcare is more, the sector of healthcare is more in private in India. 87% is private sector, while in DCs, it is more of a government sector or a public sector, wherein the GDP, that is say, over there is up to 23%, which is allotted to, over here it is hardly 9%, which is allotted. So there are basically these are few very vast and global reasons why this major differences have been found in the practicing of OTs in India and OTs in the other countries. So I think I got a bit diverted, but yeah, so that was one point, that the change in syllabus led to us pushing more towards the medical model. Second, what I want to speak about was about the research that you spoke, that even the senior occupational therapists think that we shouldn't be learning research. It's because in India, research is more about academicians doing research. See, I as a student and even as a private practitioner, I always wanted to do research. But over here, there is no support for researchers who are doing privately or who are non-academicians, to the point that whenever we log in at any of the websites, you need a college email ID, to even get access to some things. Even when you go to an ethics committee, private ethics committee, or in a private hospital, they would ask for which institute are you attached to. So what happens is that, so if you look at it that way, so our teachers are right. I mean, when you come to academics, you will learn research. Karke sikhoge. So why at the student level you're supposed to do? Because hardly 1% of the students go into academics. So for 1%, are we supposed to teach the whole batch? It's something like that. That's the query. So basically, that may be one of the reason why they think that students shouldn't be, and that is why it is more
That's
focused in teaching.
precisely, Pooja. That's precisely why I said there's no creativity, because the last sentence that you said, it's not ethical actually. Uh, let
Yeah.
alone research. What I'm trying to talk about was creativity here. Why do you think there's no option for anyone who are non-academicians to do research? Is that happening everywhere else outside India? Do you think only people in universities are doing research? No, no. Why in India alone there's such kind of conceptualization about doing something in occupational therapy, and that is precisely what I'm talking about in terms of creativity. Here there are
Correct.
few points that you very nicely kind of clubbed in. One is the knowledge about the system. We don't know about it. We don't know what is DEIC, where it exists, why it exists, under which national program it exists in our country, right? Rashtriya Bal Swasthya Karyakram. How many OTs know that there's a program like that?
Mm.
And how many Ds are handled in it? Deficiency, defect, disability, and disorder. The four Ds are
Yeah.
handled in it. Each D has got per state about 100 to 200 crores investment. So the government do ask for all this. DEIC's per annum charges 2,000 crores to run the RBSK program in each state. So when these kinds of knowledges, why can't an OT who's teaching OT students talk about the system here, rather than talking about what they cannot do or limit their kind of wings to fly high? So there is too much of possibility that's there for us in India. However, I think the way we teach, as all of you, Karthik was mentioning it, Savita was mentioning it, it has to move beyond the boundaries. It's not about it happens only in the US. Why can't it happen in India? We talk about insurance system. Prime Minister PMJ scheme is there everywhere as a
Yeah.
central scheme. And in each state, there's another state-led comprehensive health insurance scheme. However, we don't know that it is all only for institutionalized care. If there is a
So
hospital
basically,
with rehabilitation team, you will get that particular service covered because the service is provided within the hospital. However, when you get out of the hospital, that scheme doesn't cover anything else. Not even medicines. You cannot buy medicines with that insurance scheme. So these kinds of knowledge is not there. We have, for example, in Tamil Nadu, we have this comprehensive health insurance scheme and it had included for the past 3 years autism. And so for the past 3 years in teaching, autism and comprehensive health insurance schemes can be kind of clubbed in teaching in master's level or undergraduate level. However, nobody knew why there's only 1 lakh per year cover for an autism spectrum disorder therapy.
Mm.
The- Per year, every child will get only 1 lakh for therapy services. There's no question of how can one particular child be costed at 1 lakh per annum with for therapy services alone. So these kinds of creative thoughts can be imbibed in research. I'm not talking about research at all. I'm talking here about creativity in terms of teaching students what all they should know, especially in a context like India when it comes to OT. And then looking inclusively, I would say, because we don't want to get ourselves mingled or working together with a physio, together with a speech language therapist. However, when you have your own clinic, then you will actually have somebody who you pay or consult in your clinic, because that's private, as you rightly said.
Yeah.
Here it's not about private. In teaching, it's more about contribution to the science as a professional of that particular science, and that is what I mean by um, a pause in creativity over the past 2 decades.
All right. So, I mean, the very insightful discussion. I've been just like feeling urged to say a few things, for the past 20, 25 minutes. And like Pooja and Suresh kind of nicely like set the stage for me to communicate that. The first question I have is, are we preparing OTs to address the need in India? So that is a key question, right? So basically, we are not actually like, I wouldn't say we are not, but we are not doing enough to prepare OTs to address the need in India. So it has to be a need-based education. And the second thing is obviously how much the OTs know the systems in India in which they're going to eventually practice after graduation, right? So if we just have our curriculum, in a restrictive manner, and also the teaching techniques are more medically based, so we are only showing one side of the coin to them, versus the other side is completely, like they're totally unaware of the other side of the coin. So by, kind of like looking at the need and then say, to address this need, OT can address these XYZ areas. And we need to really bring that into the curriculum. And also, like, more, of course, there are courses, there are, if you really look at the broad syllabus, I'm in my previous job with NBCOT, I've reviewed so many syllabus across the world, including Indian syllabus. So the syllabus actually has the pointers there, but how it is taught or how it's covered in the program is the question, the big question. So it's like basically like, we teach only the conditions, the OT assessment, OT intervention techniques, and then like question them, so yes, they have that knowledge, but how are they going to apply that knowledge in the context, in the Indian context? So I think we need to come up with more innovation here in terms of educating OTs, I believe, in terms of like here we use like simulation based assessments. We give them a scenario to solve about, and then there is a rubric to grade that way. Instead of, what is in the book, they just kind of read, memorize, and try to say, yeah, there is a good amount of knowledge there. But I think the education should go beyond that knowledge. They need to like apply that, like synthesizing that knowledge, applying that knowledge, utilizing that knowledge to solve the problem. So I don't know, like, obviously with COVID, there is a lot of schools, I believe, have started using all these technological platforms, so they are using some sort of advanced technology nowadays in terms of, educating the OTs. But, I'm not seeing beyond that being used for delivering lectures, hosting webinars and stuff. But I'm really thinking, how about like virtual case studies? How about like, using simulation, like videos, like developing simulation case scenarios and stuff. So I think if we start doing more and more contextual based case studies, like incorporate more contextual based case studies into education, I think that'll give them more relevance, more idea about how to use what they learned once they went to the, community to practice OT. And so that is one thing that I want to share. The other thing is that, why are we like so leaning towards medical model? Is it something to do with the culture? I believe so. It's like, because the Indian society, Indian community values medical professionals, they respect them. And I think in order to maintain that professional prestige and respect, the OTs in India, probably like once it was me, including me, maybe in the past, I believe like we try to align ourselves more with the medical professionals. We want to be considered more of a medical personnel, because I think that's what the society kind of gives a little bit more respect. It's more of a socio-cultural perspective. But I think that the bottom line is, that may not be true. If you really provide a meaningful, need-based, valued service, they will respect you. They are ready to pay for the services, right? I think see, like, just look at all these marketers, right? They like have come across so many articles in the field of marketing about like India as a potential market for XYZ, right? TikTok. How many people are using it? How many people are using Facebook? And so all these foreign companies like look at India as a potential market, and they never thought about like will Indians really value these type of services and pay for it or use it? right? So I think that is a market, but as long as we like develop our services and products in a more need-based manner, either one way or the other, reimbursement will come in, and that will encourage more OTs to enter into that. But yeah, so we need to just kind of reframe our thinking a little bit, infuse creativity, innovation, and technology in our education. There are so many opportunities now. I think we need to just reflect and capitalize on those things and modify our educational approach a little bit. That would really, I guess, would help OTs to be more successful in their career. And also, like, on the other side, it will solve a lot of need for the community. Thank you.
Pooja?
Basically, I was thinking that it may not be just the culture. I mean, because at least many of the colleges in India, OT, you get into OT field via science stream. You need to have 12th science in order to enroll yourself in OT. So, but I think in other countries, even the art stream is open to go into OT.
Yes.
So maybe that is one of the reasons why it is more associated with science and medicine. One, it is taught in medical colleges. Second, it is through science stream. So it is considered more as a science than arts. I think that is one of the root reason why maybe it is more associated with medical. I mean,
Very
that's
valid
my
point, with valid perspective. I totally get it.
Yeah, you're so right. But honestly, the inception of OT in the US and in the UK was mostly in social settings. But when OT came to India, they realized that the only place people were going for health improvement was in hospitals and in these medical settings. So that sort of has been the persistent model of practice in India. However, when you travel to other parts of the world, you'll see occupational therapists to a very limited extent still practice in these non-contemporary settings outside of the medical model, like the social model. But at this point, there's only 2% of OTs in the US that are practicing in non-traditional contexts. So as you said, Pooja, earlier, that if there is such a small percentage of us that are working in these sort of innovative and creative practice models in the social-based settings, then what is the need to train students when 98% of us are going to work in the heavily medically based models? And that's the part which we are trying to shift here in the US, but the industry has not supported us. Reimbursement has not supported us yet. So even if schools, educational institutions are teaching students on how to practice in these emerging areas or the non-traditional areas of practice where we can infuse more of the arts and the roots of OT, the basic philosophy of OT, the industry partners, as Suresh was talking about being more inclusive, they are not inclusive. Um, the systems have been set up in a manner in which they reimburse for the heavily based medical model because that's associated with higher skill level. We perceive individuals that work in intensive care and in hospitals to have a more sort of solid skill set. And I still remember to this day that my teachers, including the program director in my OT school, would say that if you train in a level 1 trauma center, you can go and work in any practice. You can go into the school, you can go into the psych setting, you can go into a non-medical model. But that was 20 years ago. I graduated under MUHS. I started OT school in 1999. I finished 2003, and I still remember her telling me clear to this day, if you practice here in the medical model, you can apply your skills any place where there is a non-medical model. But even after 20 years, if you put me in a non-medical model, I've realized I'm not comfortable. I'm still so used to the training the way it is that, Savita was so right. She had to hire somebody else. She had to hire an arts teacher to do a job that I can potentially do. But I have been so conditioned and ingrained and it only worsens, I've heard, and I'm so scared of that. But they say that as you get older, you're so set in your ways that it's hard to break away from it. And so as you get older, and if you're not open-minded and you're set in your ways, and I'm so used to working in an intensive care or a hospital, that I'll get more and more uncomfortable if you send me to a soup kitchen to identify patients with schizophrenia and other mood disorders.
True. I think the bottom line from whatever we heard from Karthik, from Pooja, from Savita and Sirish is that it's the teachers who are very important. uh, and so systems cannot change. We all were talking about the medical model. For a student and for an academic institution, safety and effectiveness is primary. So without my professional qualification, I cannot get into the community. So I have to be in the system, in the clinical model, because I need to be supervised by somebody else who knows what they are doing with the person, because we cannot harm a patient. So the medical model and Hippocratic cycle will run until we finish the course. However, we know that after we finish, it's up to us to do whatever we want. Nobody is going to kind of stop us. It's only us who has to think about it. I'll be very honest with my own learning. So after 4.5 years of learning, I came out and I realized that no, I may not be able to practice an effective OT. And I wanted to learn what is multidisciplinary teamwork, how this is possible, and how can we create change in a person's life as an OT. And that led me to go to Nepal, and that led me to learn public health, and that helped me to learn the systems in countries, and so it's basically our own need and thirstiness to learn more in terms of how you can contribute as an OT with the knowledge of whatever you think is available. However, for this particular topic's perspective, I would say the onus is on the teachers, um, and it is definitive need for them to kind of bridge borders and then think broad, be very creative, and motivate occupational therapists to think from an occupational therapist perspective, rather than kind of making them understand that you can only do this. I know in some universities, even till date, they say that if you don't do anything in OT, masters or PhD, you are that's not, you are no more an OT. I have experienced that. They say Suresh has done something else completely different, public health. They said he is no more an OT because he is doing public health. And now when there was COVID, everybody is kind of fighting to get their name on the government's board saying I am also a COVID warrior. What's the relationship between OT and COVID? We didn't know that. There's no evidence yet. We talk about rehabilitation needs, but that's how the system is in our country. So I think the onus has to be on the teachers who educate, rather than blindly putting it on the curriculum. Curriculum will change, and policymakers or leaders in occupational therapy education in the country can think about revising the curriculum. However, even if the curriculum is revised, the onus is on somebody who trains the young OTs. So they have to think abroad and then kind of look at it from a very creative perspective.
Thanks, Suresh, for your thoughts, Savita.
Suresh, I just was going to say exactly that. And I was wondering if there is some kind of a collaborative get together of educators, OT educators in India. Does that happen? I know there are conferences. Do they?
Yeah, in the conference also, Savita, I'd very straightforward put it down. So we do have assistant professors in this particular meeting, and there's this niche fear that if I say something, uh, as an assistant professor, an associate professor might screw my life as a professional in that particular college. So it happens. And the fear is still there. Principal is there in the same meeting. If I talk something, then something else will happen. I shouldn't open my mouth at all. So there are lots of opportunities. However, the leader of that particular educational institution takes a call, and then what is followed is only the leader's call. And if students and if academicians below the rank can kind of work together and ask questions, and if they're allowed to ask questions, I think most of the problem will be solved.
So again, I agree with Suresh's view, and as I said, everything is on the paper. If you look at the Indian OT curriculum, there are some information about the systems, and there are information about community-based practice and everything. So the one again, the onus is more on the OT educators, how they are, using their syllabus to teach the course, and how they are imparting everything into the education. So that's the first point. So there was a nice summary, Suresh, definitely, and I think just we just like reaching that 1 hour mark, but I'm really curious to hear from Nidhi, Miriam, and Kripa, just in general their thoughts about the topic or anything that we discussed so far before we wrap up the meeting. So Nidhi, would you like to share your views or thoughts about this topic, or what you kind of gleaned from this conversation?
Sure, sir. Thank you. Firstly, thanks for the opportunity. I've been attending all of this is my fourth attendance here, and I must say I've gained a lot. I've had the opportunity to listen to all of your perspectives, which has helped me shape my thoughts in a way in which I can develop myself professionally. So, in relevance to today's topic, I have a few pointers. I've put them down. They may not necessarily be in an orderly fashion, but yes. So, as students, as somebody who's just finished her post graduation, I feel we need to be trained in advocacy and awareness. How do we bring it to the community? Although all of us spoke about the thing that we are very much concentrated in the medical model, we are not moving beyond the medical model. And as you said, sir, Karthik sir said, there is a lot of prestige associated with the medical identity that we have in the Indian context. So only when we are able to stand up for ourselves that, okay, we do have meaningful roles in the community as well, only then will we be able to put a solid footing. And for that, we need advocacy skills as well, where we are able to represent our unique profession in front of the relevant representative bodies, and we are able to get the kind of funding, the kind of support that is required for us to actually do what we are supposed to do at the community level. Alongside that, I also feel we need to establish our role identities while working in a multidisciplinary team. There's often a clash between OTs, PTs, OTs, special educators, OTs, psychologists, as to, of course there are a lot of overlap areas, but then we need to show what is unique about our profession, and that is something which we need to impart that kind of knowledge to all of our undergraduate students as well. Within the profession of OT itself, the workforce survey also says the same thing. My personal research also says the same thing, that there is a very little awareness, and there is a very little participation of OTs in core mental health. So that kind of stigma which is there within the profession itself, that okay, OT is more towards physical PMR. No, OT is not just PMR. We do have a very important role in psychosocial rehab as well. So that needs to be firmly established. And for that, as you said, Suresh sir, educators need to take initiatives. They should not let their personal biases creep in and flavor their way of interacting with students. I also felt from my interaction with my fellow PG students and people who are working that if there is some kind of uniformity in the syllabus throughout the country, then that actually helps. As a student from Tamil Nadu, I have a different syllabus. As students in Maharashtra, they have a different duration for their program, they have a different syllabus. So if there's some kind of uniformity in the syllabus, of course, the council will be taking it forward. But then if there is some uniformity in the syllabus, then that will actually be helpful. Just like we have the NMC having a very good syllabus, a very uniform syllabus for medical education throughout the country. For OT education also, I think that is the need of the hour. And also about CBCS. CBCS is happening a lot in the Western countries. Students get to choose their electives, but here that does not exist. Let's say I'm interested in sensory integration, but I also get to learn only limited sensory integration, which is a part of the program. So if there is CBCS, then students will have the
Nidhi, we lost you. We couldn't hear you.
now.
Yeah, you're back. Yeah.
Yes. So I was talking about CBCS last.
Mm-hmm.
So if students are given the opportunity to choose electives even at their undergraduate level, they will have more opportunities to diversify. And even at that level of their education, not all of the students go on to do masters. A lot of them end their educational journey with their bachelors, and they go on to become practicing clinicians. So if they're given the opportunity to learn what they're actually interested in, then I think they will do best what they are actually good at. And in terms of the evaluation, this is my last point. In terms of evaluation, we see that the way we are evaluated as students, of course, the clinical evaluation is a different part, and the theoretical evaluation is a different part. But if we are evaluated on real world skills, the clinical evaluation does cover that. But in terms of theoretical evaluation also, if we are evaluated in terms of skills which we can actually apply, then I think that will be giving us better understanding into what students are actually gaining from their coursework.
Agreed.
So this is all that I have got to say.
Wonderful, wonderful.
And thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, thank you. And Kriba?
Can you all hear me?
Yeah.
I'm sorry I was a bit late for the meeting, and I was patiently listening to all your conversation. It was really insightful. Thank you for that. So regarding the topic, again, so most of the points are already covered, but I have like certain things in my I've written, or I would like to share my experience because I'm an academician and in the working in a college setting. So the most thing that I see in my students or when somebody is like moving out of the college is, they have a lack of confidence in when they move out, in spite of learning a lot, because of the lack of practical skills. They have a confidence issue that actually puts OTs in the baseline of the profession, or I would say they aren't proud of saying or that they are an occupational therapist, which actually is the major problem I see among the students. They're a little bit shy. They're like, I don't know what I would do. I don't know about my future. So that's a threat I would see, like in the coming generation, that they see all this. So that has to be addressed, and how we can address definitely by uh, having them go to a different posting in emerging areas, or as Sir was saying about the CBR. We earlier had CBR, and we try to send people out for the community settings and try to help them see different patients and all of it, but everything is limited, and especially after COVID, everything has like gone just like that. So that's one thing I see in the education system as a threat, and which we need to motivate our students or the young uh, you know OTs about it. And regarding the medical model, again, that's even as a professor, or as a teacher, if I tell my student that client can be a person, or a group or population, they look at you as if I'm saying something, a new concept or something. I just deviated away from the topic. So that is still is there. So probably only when the teachers, from their perspective, they're from their side, if they push and they start to open up the mind of these students, I think that would go, and they would start investing their time, and they would start looking at the opportunities outside hospitals and outside the comfortable zone. So that again, as a teacher, we need to insist more. That again goes back to the syllabus, and we need to look into the curriculum and how to push them to look, or start asking questions about how can we upgrade our profession, or how can we go beyond that. And the other aspects, I think most of it was covered, and the many things, as or one concern I have is like everything is in the paper. As you see, the curriculum has everything that says everything, but what the student learns at the end of the day, or at the end of the 4 years, is very little when compared to what we have in the syllabus. So that as professionals, as in the education system, we need to definitely give more importance to the skill-based competencies rather than just the questions and all of it. For that, we need to definitely work hard. Maybe we can do, as you say, the simulation based, probably have labs for different the different domains, or you can do case studies. Case studies are very rarely happening these days. So as sir was saying, many lectures, many webinars, but people are not sure how to help their clients. So case studies like that would help. So during the COVID time, I have pushed my students to make videos about whatever topics that I've given, like probably range of motion or anything. Like make videos with the family members that you have and send it to me. Make an assessment of your house about the home evaluation, send it to me. Maybe we can do something like that, more of where they can go to the place or whatever that's available, and then like they can start doing something like that. That should be more given importance. So again, the organization, the leaders, everybody need to be very innovative in order to do something like that. So, and after all this, definitely the teacher's perspective and the different methods they use are very, very important, which there needs to be a lot of lot of things has to be done in that area as well.
I mean, I just like love the way that you highlighted the word competency. Yeah, we need to be really like, focus on more on competency than rote knowledge. So competency is beyond that, right? Knowledge and how to apply that knowledge and synthesizing that knowledge, everything inclusive. So we need to really like work on the competency-based education model. With that, I still see Pooja's hand. Pooja, do you have any final thoughts? And then I'll go over to Dr. Lala to wrap up the meeting.
So basically, I had raised hand for a very previous topic. I think during which Shirish sir was, talking about the, the hierarchy. Or I think Suresh sir was talking about the hierarchy. So basically, I remember during my UG days, like since at the time, students from other universities or other states were allowed to do PGs in Maharashtra or in, so basically at that time, there was the structure of positions, or rather positions of lecturer post were also different, so they had JD, they had then a lecturer post and etc. Then we had PGs who were all from different states, Delhi, South, Assam, etc. So, and at that time there was a culture wherein every PG was given one UG, in the clinical practice. So what used to happen was, it was not the teachers who used to check our case reports. We used to have that PG, who used to check our case reports. So I was actually lucky enough to be during that time. So I had a mentor,
We lost her, I guess. Pooja, we lost you. Probably some connectivity issues on her end, I guess. So for the time's sake, Dr. Lala, would you like to just kind of wrap up the discussion? And I, first, before that, I just kind of want to thank everyone for being here today.
I do the same. A lot of gratitude for everybody who was here, and you all summed up so many thoughts in terms of what can be done to move this needle forward, even if we plant seeds. And we are not here to see the fruits of those trees. I think a seed could be potentially planted. I think one of those things, as I wrap up, which may come across as not extremely positive, but maybe something for us to reflect on collectively as an OT community, is that how many of us would choose the same path if we were to go back 20 or 30 or whatever number of years ago and choose OT as our profession. And how many of us at this age, or whatever age we are, would recommend OT as our profession to choose for our children. And I think that's one of those factors that would determine how much of a change in some ways we can make because in other healthcare communities, particularly with physicians, we've seen these lineages of physicians in a family that no matter what happens, even if they're unsatisfied with healthcare in general, forget OT or PT or ST, they will choose to be a physician no matter what happens. And I have yet to see something like that in OT, where I will see an OT or meet an OT who will tell me, no, I was born to be an OT. I couldn't have been anybody else. And if I was to go back in time after my 12th standard or high school, I would still choose OT. It's very rare. I've met some, but they are very few and far between. And the other thing also then is how many of us would recommend OT to our children. That's the kind of change I'm hoping that we can make to our own mindsets, our own growth mindsets, because we like some of you have identified very correctly and so timely that we have our own personal biases and then some, not just personal but professional biases that creep in to allow us to make a change with regards to innovation and creativity. So as I sum this up, I'm so happy to see Suresh's hand raised when I said something about born to be an OT. Welcome to anything else but OT. But since Pooja is back, I'm going to let her finish her thoughts. Thank you for joining us. Sorry we lost you there for a second. I was just summing
Yes.
some of the thoughts, Pooja.
Yeah, so basically the concept of mentorship over the time was lost is what I wanted to, you know, it's my personal, see, I was in KEM for 8 years, 4.5 for UG, then 3 years for PG. And I was very much in connected with KEM even after my, knowing the whole scenario and being one in the center where just one or two batches ahead was Mumbai University, and then I was in MUHS, and then few years down the line there was a new syllabus that happened. So we had mentors where we got to rely on some of the PG. Now, when I was a PG student, most of the UG students didn't approach us, and even if we tried to help, it was like there was a gap, you know, that kind of the whole culture was lost over the time. And now, when we speak to youngsters who come to my clinic for mentorship, it's most of the times, they are busy, seniors are busy, they don't have time, whom to approach, teachers, they give us some guidance, but in the clinic or in the, OPD, IPD, whom should we approach? So the whole scenario has changed. Plus now there is no, influence of other states. So initially we used to have, uh, added knowledge. Say for example, if one PG was from Chennai, another from Delhi, we used to have, great case studies, because one would say that no, over here it's taught like this, no, it's taught like this, or some new idea would crop up.
Yeah, the diversity. Yeah.
But now UGs are also from KEM, PGs are also from KEM. There is only singular track, there's no major discussion in case studies. Case studies happen, at least in KEM we had fixed Saturdays as case studies. Every Saturday there was a case study which was given to a PG, and few of the Fridays we had journal clubs, JCs. So all those things were there. So that was not an issue, but the new ideas that would crop up. See, now currently the whole group that we are here are from different areas with different backgrounds, with different colleges that we have studied in. So we could bring in so much of ideas. But if, say, all of us were from the same college, the ideas would have been nearly the same. So at that time, we were lucky to have that, plus the mentorship program or the mentorship system. But now we don't have that. So for very same reason, I've started with the mentorship program at my clinic, so that the youngsters who feel lost, they can come learn the practical skills at the clinic. I can mentor them. You can mentor throughout life, like something like that.
Yes.
Thank you, Pooja, for your thoughts. That's really nice of you to have that mentorship model. as you talked about a few points there with lack of time, lack of space in the schedule, sometimes can be an issue. And we are seeing incestuous trends even in our practice areas where, it's incest in so many ways where during COVID and especially in these past 2 years, we've seen folks just stay where they are. So the exchange of ideas has been remote and not in person to allow for more diversity of thought and viewpoints. That still remains a threat and concern to creativity and innovation. And I do see comments from Suresh about having the onus on teachers and faculty members. But I know some of you who are in roles of faculty members also feel drained because there's so much expected off of a teacher or professor in occupational therapy to the point where some of the OT schools in the US have started hiring non-OTs to help ease the burden on OT educators, but then that sort of starts a cycle and a chain of another set of events, which may be positive, but can also have their own sets of challenges associated with that. So I'm hoping that in the future sessions, we can talk about how educators can feel sort of depleted, to put it mildly, with the amount of responsibilities that they have in OT education. And we have a shortage of OT educators in the profession because most of us choose to stay in the role of practitioners. So, how do we create opportunities and, again, if not anything else, just plant a seed which may or may not flourish in our lifetimes, but at least may resolve some of these dilemmas for the future generation of OTs to come.
One thing to add on, Suresh, is just like how Kripa said, competency-based teaching, we also need to have educators who are competent to teach. Okay, I'm sure all of you from different places, it's different countries, you will agree that in your university, you will not let a PG student mentor a UG student. It is not possible at all, because as a PG student, you are supposed to study PG. And they think that you have your own boundaries of learning and you will not be let to do a duty of a mentor, because if I ask you to mentor, then I'll have to pay you for mentoring. So it's should come out of will. So I think the bottom line, it's very well summed. So onus is on the teachers, and they should actually be very creative to look at competency based teaching. At the same time, they will have to be competent enough to teach occupational therapy and then mentor students towards motivating them to be OTs in the future.
Yes, yes. Excellent discussion. Thank you so much again for everyone for joining us today. Our next session will be in May. We look forward to having you again. So let's hope that this discussion that we had today generates more discussion and then some leads to some positive change down the road. Thank you and enjoy your weekend wherever you are. And just FYI, Savita was a past IOTTT member. Thank you, Savita, for joining us. And bye, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye, everyone. Bye.